I did have a show. I still have the show, but Queens Museum Jerome Foundation Fellowship. Originally in October, it's shifted because of obviously everything, and also I hope everyone's healthy and doing well and safe. And wanted to make sure about that. And so that is being shifted to January or February of 2021. So we thought it'd be nice to, and I started work, the initial work, which I started a lot with drawing and collage and things like that in the studio. So I'm gonna go through some work, past work that is leading up to this show, or just things I've been doing. And then kind of dive into, I'm gonna use my phone as a second camera, and to roam around the studio, and I'll show some things I'm doing really up close, a lot of textile work and collage work, and starting some rug pieces so I can get real tight in there and show it. So I'm gonna just jump in and keep it moving. And like John was saying, if there's any questions, something quick or something, just unmute and say it, and I'll try and answer it. And then like I said, go around the studio, and then I'll come back and sit back at the computer, and we'll go through some more question answer through the slides or anything really. I'll have more of a chance. So I'm gonna switch to share screen. So I started by thinking about how to kind of label this talk, and it's definitely in line with some themes I've said before, or but I was been thinking about Venom and Anti-Venom a lot, and this will definitely emerge. These words will emerge, I think, as I go through. But the idea of like a venom or something that I think about repulsion and attraction. Sometimes things that we're repulsed by, we also have an attraction to, and that can be in different forms. It could be ideas or visuals or instances, but taking that venom or that repulsion and using it in the work to sort of create an anti-venom, or a sort of something that takes it, brings it in, and especially in art, I feel, and film and other forms, but you can use it and spit it back out in a form that you kind of subvert or take in or use and create an anti-venom. So you have to take some of the venom to create something that resists it or counters it in a way. So diving right in, this is called Select Events. It's actually kind of a text piece or a bio or something I made about, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. And at this time, I was very much struggling or working through like some things I wanted to work in my work. And I definitely occurrences of like, I was dealing personally with instances of violence or aggression or things like that I had grown up with or was dealing with. And I just felt like those were the important things I had to deal with in my work. There's other things I had done, like filmmaking and design and all that are creative based and have different outcomes. But as far as my own artwork, I had to deal with some of the big kind of events in my life, and then I think also in society and culture and violence, hypermasculinity, all these things are quite prevalent and problematic. So it was my way of like starting with that, and to actually show this now took a long time. Like it was something I listed and made, but it wasn't overnight where I could just show it publicly. But I think part of my experience is, and also my feeling towards arts, is to show the truth of it. And some of these, Yeah, like you'll see go into some of the work and definitely subvert it or try and, you know, kind of mess with it. So starting, so these are some things up to almost like a biography. Actually, Cliff Owens really liked this when I applied to get into his Denniston Hill, what's it called, residency performance. So I want to show this piece. This is about four or 5 years ago. I'll just start it and talk a bit over it. So this is a performance at Vermont Theater Center, and that's me. And actually, is my sound, is the sound okay? Okay. So this is another artist, performance and sculptor, James. But you know, I was thinking about one of these really strong feelings I had or experiences, and it's, you know, I used to wrestle, but I also like was bullied, or, you know, people would start a fight or try and intimidate you. And I felt like that was such a unique, specific feeling, you know? So I wanted to work with that. And let me, hold on. So I created, started with this performance that, oh, shoot, sorry. There's all these things in the way. Okay. So a lot of times I work with rules in performance. So it allows some improvisation, but the players or the people involved have these rules. So in this, the rule was like, on this box, we're in our own space of intimidation. We're trying to do this performative intimidation, which is trying to act tough or something. And then there's this moment, like here or later, where we recognize each other. I'll let this go. But we have this program of just trying to act maybe tough or intimidating each other. And here's a point where we recognize each other. So the other rule was we never get into a fight or anything physical. It's all about this peacocking, this intimidation, which created its own sort of result, you could say. We're just kind of like looping now in a way, and it almost not knowing what to do, and then we just So that was the only take we did, and I didn't know the box was gonna break, and we didn't. So that was kind of the only existing performance of that. But it was important to work with James. He was such a good improviser and working off each other. But it became sort of this simple practice of this looping sort of intimidation. But without an ending, you know, which created these moments of like erotic or comedic, definitely stupid moments, and like the box breaking and all this. I created this physical whole. So this led to this other project, More Human, which kind of took that, those rules and that, and then this is like a flyer, you know, pull in a lot of, I like the idea of flyers and, you know, growing up with music and, I don't know, sports and all this. I try and use some of that, those little models. But this flyer for this performance, and we had a much bigger sort of stage or platform. This is after the performance and the video projection after, but it was a live, and here's some apparatus. Just go back to this for a sec, but this was a live performance with a video projection. So I'll show a bit of that. And here's the apparatus that was used during the performance. Using, you know, I used to wrestle and I was captain of the wrestling team and things like that. And then, you know, but it was such a sort of culture, sports macho culture, but me, I was kind of a bit in between, but I take some of that experience and some of those, some of that some of the problems in that culture and use it. So here, these are two performers, and I was filming actually, but this is a photo series from it, and using, bringing the performers back to where the performance happened, at the site of like the trauma or the performance, and re-engaging and making photographs from it. This is Francis on the left and AJ on the right. AJ is a sports trainer and an actor, and then Francis on the left is a theater actor. So that'll come into play and why I chose these two characters or these two performers for the act of performativity. Another a writer, he's actually a socialist, social behaviorist, social scientist, sorry, Thomas Sheff, and he talks about hypermasculinity and the idea of like anger bound by shame, where the idea of acting tough or acting hypermasculine comes from shame and not showing emotion, but showing more like using anger and this toughness to hide your shame. So these moments of like this, hiding, literally. So I'll play a little bit of this. Just to show, oh, actually this is a cut down, so this will. So this is the audience invited and kind of gallery audience. This is live. I'm the camera person downstairs this is at False Flag Gallery, the first DIY space. So this was upstairs in the gallery. Down here was a construction storage that we used. he came upstairs, and I'm filming the whole time with a wireless sort of feed, and the audience starts to notice that he's actually there. He's not like pre-recorded, and the two performers meet. And this sound is their microphone feedback. So it's just as they get closer, the feedback drone sound intensifies. It's almost like motion tracking. So again, I like the photos. I asked Francis to come back, and he's like I said, a theater actor. And why I wanted to work with him is because he grew up with a quite kind of masculine father who'd tell him to keep the movement, act tough, or perform masculinity in this way. So I wanted to use his training as a theater actor to like work with that. So he's mixing like his physical body posture and performance with emotional, mixing and distorting those, sort of coaching him.
That's good. A little more. Really push it. Just stay in the corner. Now toughen up. Head jerk, head fake, Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Jump. But it's kind of using this performativity, acting as material, like being elastic with it. Going from this, and this is very much Francis and his talent, being able to do this, and knowing this sort of performativity. So it's really a looping between these two emotions of like anger and shame, the shame anger loop. Which are related, come from one emotion. Jump. Okay.
Can I ask you a quick question, Asif?
Yes.
I was just wondering, so then the hole that the first performance when they pushed a hole into the foundation, the pedestal or the ground, so that was something you built on like intentionally in these performances afterwards?
Yeah, from this piece, from fronting, you know, I left this section that was like kind of unreinforced. Almost, I kind of do that sometimes. I'm like, let's see what happens, you know? Does it break? I don't know. It was subconsciously like, I'll leave this, let's see. And it became such a big element. And kind of like a symbolic thing and also a thing to contest with. So with this, yeah, you know, improvising, they were both supposed to go, they were both, or I forget, the holes were present, they weren't really sure where, just for safety a bit, but they improvised off it because the holes weren't breaking. So you remember he was kicking through it and all that. And then it just led to the next day or a few days later, this photo series, these holes becoming kind of their home or their private space where they hide themselves or they show maybe more emotion. So yeah, you introduce something, you don't know, I don't know where it's gonna go all the time, but it opens literally a hole to something else. I do that a lot in sculpture, you know, just with material, but it happened here with this platform and how they could perform. You know, Francis brought a lot to it. Him in the hole echoing his sort of crying was like really powerful, much more than I could think of. But doing things like that, yeah, brought something to where the first one we didn't get to, you know, which was getting the idea of making the hole big enough that you could live in it. Yeah. If that answers it.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's great.
So then these are 2017, a few years ago, and then a bunch of these next pieces were my last year at Columbia. And there was like Trump was elected and there was the Muslim ban. So I was reacting a lot to some of that venom, the Muslim ban. And there was an amazing image of a lot of people, thousands of people protesting in front of the Brooklyn City Hall. And all prostrate, kind of in prayer position, Muslims and non-Muslims kind of together. But, I noticed, I've seen, my family's from Pakistan. I grew up Muslim. So I've definitely seen people praying on cardboard in Harlem, up by Columbia. Before that, on the mosques, could be on a towel on the ground. So for these protesters, I wanted to make a piece, and actually I could see this being made more at a high volume, but I took cheap sort of memory foam and laser cut it at Columbia with a laser cutter. So I made this kind of arabesque design, but I put the laser at a very low power, so it didn't cut all the way through, but it did like leave this denatured heat. You could see like the browning looks almost ancient, but it actually is just from heat denatured. So it's this memory foam prayer rug to protect the body. So it definitely felt like something I could perform with. I almost performed with it, but and then something like this I did do some performance with, and this is Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. Was Muslim convert basketball player in the early 90s. He was like the Steph Curry of that era. And I made this during Colin Kaepernick was in the news a lot. This was September 2017 for his protest. And, some figures like Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, or like figures I grew up with who also had social, and protests as part of their sports identity. So I made this out of a laser cut. I did wear this for some performance, and it's industrial felt. It's used to pad machinery for repetitive impact. And I was doing this performance, which I'll show a little bit later, called Standing Reversal, where there was a lot of impact on my hips and my pelvis, and I actually needed something to protect the side of my body. So I made this sort of to kind of to honor him at this time of Colin Kaepernick, and to remind he was the only one protesting same thing, police brutality, but he was the only one who didn't stand for the anthem. And he was eventually blackballed and ended up playing in Turkey. But this is a guy who was at the level of Steph Curry, like all-star, super big, but was not supported by even like other players. Maybe because he was also Black Muslim, I don't know. Well, he wasn't Black Muslim, part of Shabazz, but he was a convert. And here's, I'll show really quick, I think, some of this performance. Come on. This is Francis again. I'll jump over here just to kind of the core of it.
This issue, and the president has given us a lot.
So he had this really kind of corny theater
As you know,
play
it's
he
mainly
was
the
in.
states that were still in contact with Al-Ghazali's territories. Bosnia, Albania, Macedonia.
That was dealing with, like, he was this racist sort of NSA officer in this play he was in. So I was like, let's use that as material.
Classified information. Although I can assure
So we
you,
cut out any other actor's performance, and he's just saying these lines. And we replaced the cigarette he had in this play, of course, with a whistle.
What's that smell? Are you smoking in your room again? I came to let you know that your mother's staying late tonight. Doesn't matter that much, does it? She lets me know, I let you know. Simple. Well, she's busy. Wow! Nice guitar you got there. Yeah, I used to play too. I started young. Just a fun fact. I used to have long hair. Can you believe it? I used to have hair, and it was long too. Oh, good old days. Bernie on the drum, Falcon bass. Deb had the voice of an angel, and I was rocking that Rickenbacker. No. I forgot. I got this for you. I need your help to help you. You ungrateful, selfish little cunt. You know your life is in my hands, right? I decide what's next. I am in control. And maybe I don't really want to know. All I know is I have enough info to dethrone you of the royal privilege of being a citizen of this nation. To let you rot.
All right.
This room.
I'll just show the ending.
You know what can happen. So you're going on a little trip? Where are you headed? Well, don't go for too long. But you know, your mom's going on business for a few days. And I was thinking we could have a little business of our own. Oh, here she is. Gotta go. But I'll be back.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the play? What's the lines were taken from?
It was a play. Sorry. It was a play. I actually don't know the name. Francis was at SUNY Purchase, and he was doing theater there, and it's a student-written play, something that was dealing with the Muslim ban or flight, you know, and NSA. He played this NSA officer who was in a relationship with, I think, a woman from like Afghanistan or something. So I don't know the play. It's like a student sort of run thing, but I could find out.
Thank you.
It was pretty corny. Around this time, I also made this other piece with the industrial felts, and this This is industrial felt laser cuts and embossed and stiffened. So it kind of, I was interested in taking the lining that would be like in sports equipment or war battle armor. And this references some Islamic or Mughal battle armor from 12th century. But using the lining, which would be felt or padding or a foam padding, and using that for the exterior. And instead of something that would be like regalia or show the heritage or the tradition, cut this felt to be more like scarring, embossed, you know, scarring being this sort of form of embossing. So again, relating to like showing maybe personal trauma or shame on the exterior rather than like just these accomplishments or heritage. Let me see. Okay, I just want to make sure about time. I'm going to show this performance. This was at Skowhegan. This was maybe a year and a half ago. I'll just show a quick clip of this. So I was looking at these, there's a whole genre, a subgenre of kind of backyard fights or YouTube fights, people recording fights on YouTube and publishing them. And so this is at Skowhegan High School when I was at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in this residency. And we went, you know, I wanted to do these fight videos, but, you know, obviously change it. So this is me and another, he does some performance, SV Randall. And what we changed was, you know, fights are full of adrenaline and, you know, sports and all, they move quick. So we changed it that we had to move really slow. And in doing so, we had to hold each other up. And that actually, to make it look like we were struggling, to maintain the struggle actually, meaning us wrapped or like rolling. But what happened actually was like we were in like this move here, I'm really holding him up with my legs more than he's struggling with me. So it kind of changed the parameters of like a parking lot fight from like something you're forcing on someone to actually holding them up and caring for them. So here I'm like balancing him. So I still feel it in my body, how this felt rolling on the ground and like supporting him when it actually looks like a struggle, but it's slowed down. So our movements are probably 3 times as slow or 5 times, you know. And this was shown a couple places, but it sort of loops in and out, meaning this is always this continuous sort of looping where the camera, we use this sort of wipe to go back to the beginning. Yeah. Hold on. Okay, back to this. So again, I made a little poster out of it, or kind of punk posters. Here's a important, this is a piece that started a few rug pieces. So this, you know, I, as John was saying, I have a background in science as well. In undergrad, I studied genetics. So I take some of those models or some of those actions, and in DNA, genetic recombination, 2 chromosomes will overlap and they'll swap material, and then they'll pull apart. So it's sort of this subtle, aggressive thing, or trading, exchange of material, but it collapses, into this separate space, into personal space, this chiasma. And I deal with this a lot, this chiasma, this collapse of space between two people that's in sex or fighting or violence, but it also creates change. So here, these are two rugs I grew up with, or not actual, but types. One is an Afghan rug on the left, an Afghan rug made in Pakistan. It's vegetable dyed, wool rug, hand knotted. And then the blue rug is a nylon synthetic rug, kind of what you would see in wall-to-wall carpeting in suburban houses, many houses, in America. And I grew up with a prayer rug, or a rug on the left, on top of a wall-to-wall carpeting on the right. So I wanted to kind of swap, merge them two. So you can see here, I cut holes out of the Afghan rug of all the faces and the patterns, and then the blue goes into it and fills those. So you can see on the left side, these shapes, which become more kind of geometric or minimalist sort of shapes. The blue fills that void, and those pieces are brought to the right side. And then I recut those to make this sort of vertical landscape. And I was looking at like video games or Super Mario Brothers, things like that, to create this sort of vertical landscape. So all the vertical landscape, or this sort of scene on the right, is embedded. I cut into you'll see some other photos that maybe show it better, but I cut into the 1-inch carpet pile and embedded all these pieces. And I don't weave anything. I don't have that. It's a very sculptural process of cutting again, and recollaging and embedding and gluing into it. And then suspending it with steel. I'm going to go into this next kind of body of work and other, that was, will bring out some of the things we've seen. And then I want to go into showing stuff in the studio. But Raf, from early on, there was one thing that happened when I was 20, or, my father was killed by someone else when I was 20 years old. And that person is unidentified. And there's something I was, like I said, something I felt like I had to incorporate into my work. And over the past couple years, mostly, he emerged as this force, you could say, named Raf. It's based off his description of being like dark complexion, brown, but like what type of brown? South Asian, South American. So Raf could be Raphael, or it could be Rafiq. Rafiq being a Middle Eastern name, Raphael, a Hispanic name, and using that that sort of the unknowingness of it, or the variability of it. And another things that came forward, and these are actual eyewitness reports. And so this was part of the Whitney ISP curatorial show at the Kitchen, where I showed some of these in this catalog. And there's 4 or 5 different detectives that took evidence, statements, and I retraced their some of their words in a broad marker, which, to get closer to their handwriting, they had all different handwritings. Yeah, you could see slightly different handwritings. To get closer to sort of their handwriting, but in doing so, it redacted. And I just saw each sort of witness focusing on different features, you know, and we see this in movies and CSI and cops and, you know, this sort of like psychological awareness or specificity of how people notice. But one thing that always came up was this red plaid. And he said, it's right here, wearing red plaid long sleeve shirt. So this suspect, and he had long dark hair. And then other ones talk about the car. He escaped in a green truck called a dually. It has actually 4 wheels in the back. It's a wide load truck with chrome trim. So I took all of this, you know, didn't happen overnight, took years of like, and then digesting these facts to the point, you know, I was envisioning what happened. And, you know, like my father was not some angel. He was he also was abusive and aggressive and things like that in my family. So, you know, this occurrence happening to him, you know, maybe was out of things he did. But, you know, we all have this sort of engagement maybe with violence, or we see it as material on TV or in the paper, obviously. But I have this private sort of connection to it. And this project of RAF is to take these private, almost banal things like a red and black plaid shirt, blue jeans, long hair, a green truck, and through this work of video, sculpture, performance, and text even, to kind of bring in to bring in the viewer, you know, the art viewer, other people to engage with it, and take something that's very private and have, you know, see it in a more, hopefully public engagement sort of way. One thing I did was I took these crime reports and I used them just as material, and I just like shoved them in crevices. They'll pop up in other places, but like I used phototack and reprinted them as just to show that I'm not treating this as, I'm not sympathetic. I'm not treating them as precious. There are things that are like material, you know, and that's my way of like engaging with this to kind of, again, the venom, taking it in and creating anti-venom. This, and John, just let me know like if I'm really going over, but I'm trying to get through. This is the last section to get through. This image.
Yeah, you could just go until you, as long as you want. Maybe some people will have to leave at a certain point, but I just, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get to the studio. Right, I'll get through this and get to the studio part. So this image, this guy in the middle that's kind of ghosted, he's one of the suspects that I kind of, he was sort of possibly the guy who hired the guy who did this killing. So I found him on Google, and it was kind of a very business image of him, photo. And this is his house, his front yard, and this is his backyard, found on Google Maps. And the ghosting here is done by how they pull fingerprints. It's just cellophane tape that pulls the ink. So these top left and right images here, actually they're right here. These images are made from the ink being pulled of his image and his house and all that by tape. So that was one way to deal with some of this information. And I mixed it. I started bringing in the idea of the alien, the alien being prevalent in like, or the ghost, a shapeshifter. Since I don't know who the suspect is, red and black plaid being shape-shifting, having different variations. I'm mixing in images of the alien from the movie Alien, him being a shapeshifter, or I reference a lot the alien. It's called a jinn, from like Mughal or Islamic illustration or Arabesque illustration, the miniature paintings. The idea of the jinn or the ghost being in so many traditional storytelling. So in this one, I used popular, filmmaking, which is the alien himself. So you could see some of the teeth and some of that mixed in with these other images. And again, to make plaid, the sort of plaid pattern right here, the gradations of black and gray. No red, but that could be something in the future. And then this was presented here. This is this show at Crush Curatorial, a curatorial project space in Chelsea, where I wanted to just show the sort of visual language of this raft project. He was described as having shoulder-length hair, so I made a portrait just out of hair and void. Hair being sort of creates volume, but is full of void or empty space. So I did different hairstyles. I'm gonna go a little quick. Hair, 4 types of plaid. If you Google plaid, you get 1,000 variations of plaid. I took 4, and this idea of genetic recombination again, started to swap threads. And I'm doing that for real in the studio, and I'll show that in a sec. And then going further, so this being maybe, if you think of microscopy, like 10 times magnification, this could be like 1,000, where you're getting closer to this sort of chromosome shape, which is this hourglass shape. It's done in genetic banding. And the bands, I guess the bands, there's some work here I'll show, but the bands on the chromosomes showing your traits like dark hair, light hair. And then I even started bringing in this kind of the claw, the alien claw, as the one who writes the gene or the plaid. And that going back to like this sort of shapeshifter or the storytelling throughout time of the alien creating evil, creating the gene, creating the DNA, and the expression of the DNA being plaid. Now we go into the main space. I kind of used some ideas behind like a clothing or athletic, in line with what I had done before, athletic sort of material. Here's some shoes, sneakers, two of them, and they're like, I cut them, and they're swapping material, basically. But they're surgically cut, kind of like the carpets, where one is cutting into, they're swapping sneaker material and laces, and they're becoming this chiasma again. These are also another set of sneakers, variations. It's basically variations of sneakers trading material, just like how jeans would trade material. One is doing it through shoelaces. So this sort of model of genetics being introduced into sculpture, really, and objects, the seam of a sneaker coming apart and another sneaker coming in. This is based off a weight bench. And I was thinking of like the weight bench as a chrysalis, the chrysalis for a butterfly, ironically, being this place of puberty, and using trophies. So this took place in Texas, and the type of butterfly in this part of Texas is called the painted lady butterfly. And that butterfly has like a gold and clear chrysalis. So those were materials I used in this. And then these are wrestling trophies, things I had, similar trophies I got in high school. So I use a lot of myself to kind of into this idea of wrath, because that's all I got. But of maybe how he grew up, or some of the things he did, and maybe some of it was weight training, you know, this sort of like growing up in the weight room people talk about, or sports, or this sort of culture. Wrestling culture definitely comes into play for me. And then this sort of alien shape that comes from the trophy shape, or the trophy color. And so this shape I made is chromed, you know, and then the labels even of the trophies have phrases from the eyewitness reports. Through my rear view mirror, I wasn't quite sure what, don't really know if I could. This sort of ambiguity, whereas a trophy would be you know, like a first, second place, it's like solid. This is ambiguous. This is all Velcro and motocross padding, and kind of like chains, like metal chains a guy would wear. Like I said, the green truck I used, this was made in, it's very foreground. It's a wider view of the installation. But using, again, the evidence, like a green truck hood, this is very similar to the type of truck that was used. I found up in Skowhegan when I was there. And then I added this chroming to the front. But you can see the marking. This is from kind of like a car part graveyard, like a chop shop, that I got this hood. But then underneath, you can see through this mirror, and everything was viewed through a mirror. So I used a mirror, like a side view mirror of a truck, to see underneath the hood, which back here you can see the glimpse of all the red plaid, 4 types of red plaid that I converged, or like, again, the chiasma of 4 red plaid shirts here. But you can only see it, you can see it through this mirror, or you'd have to get underneath to see it in how it's installed here in this installation. The suspect jumped a fence, so I used aluminum, but 2 types of aluminum. This sort of fluid, hand-formed aluminum going through the crevices of aluminum, a very standard aluminum fence. You could see I re-welded the fence to have plaid patterns. That's not exactly normal how you'd see. I added a lot of these rods to have a plaid pattern. And then this sort of fluid aluminum, again, this sort of shapeshifter idea flowing through the solid aluminum. And then the plaid remnant coming out, plaid shirt again. And then this is a bit wider view, and then how that connects to this carpet piece. So part of this took place in a construction truck, a construction trailer, which could have had tile or carpeting. So that variation I took, and 2 types of carpeting converging, again, the chiasma, but, and then red plaid. So all this, and I'll show you stuff in the studio, red plaid shirts, 4 red plaid shirts breaking apart and kind of mixing. And then even closer, you can see the actual threads of red plaid pulling apart, which I'll show you here. So we're almost to this next part, but you can see everything's cut and embedded and like permanently sealed into the carpet. While it might look like disarray or something in your bedroom now, is actually an event that's sealed. You cannot clean this up. It's sealed into the carpet. And there's another view. And it kind of has these nice moments of flattening and yeah, embedding. This is another piece. This was also at the Whitney ISP curatorial show at the kitchen, where I used another variation, like what if the carpet was purple, or what if the carpet was actually carpet tile, which is like an industrial, the bottom really vibrant carpet, is something you might see in a movie theater or an institutional space or anywhere, an office building. So that's something else I could use, you know. And then again, 4 types of plaid, and they're merging to create this sort of pattern, or this merging pattern.
I have a quick question about the rugs.
Yes.
I'm also a textile artist, and I was wondering how you actually embedded, like what the process of embedding them was.
Hold on. I'll show you here in the studio.
Okay.
Okay. Got it. All right, this is exciting.
Yes,
So
yeah.
we are, hold on, the microphone's on my laptop, but the image is coming through this cell phone. So what I'm gonna do, you kind of have 2 views. And now, you know, if you have questions, it's a little looser now, I would say. What am I doing? I'm like confused. Oh, did it? Oh, there's a lag. Okay, maybe we're caught up now. Okay. There's a bit of a lag. Hold on. Okay, there we go. So can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna just end, this is my nice new studio. That's my tool wall. Everyone likes a tool wall. I come in here and here's my cleansing alcohol station. I ride my bike up here. I'm very fortunate to be able to come during this time. So I'm very, very happy. But I ride up and I live nearby. So I'm just going to give a quick little tour. And this I'm working on. There's a body of work that definitely I use a lot of aluminum for thermal, and just showing you a little bit. This is I'm sort of trying to make plaid into a volumetric, kind of like a volume or a shape. Here's the next rug piece, and you can see just so the microphone. Okay, and you can see like this would be another wall-to-wall carpeting, and this is a rug from Pakistan that I got shipped Islamabad, from Pakistan, and these are, I'm starting to mark, this is tape, so you can see all the tape pieces, which would be parts that are cut. So to answer your question, I'm gonna show, like here's like a piece of plaid, but you know, it's the same thing. I would cut a piece here, and then right now, this is sitting on top. So what I do is I kind of trace, or I get the spot I want to place this in, and maybe put tape around it to sort of, and then in this space where I want to put this, embed it, I cut all the carpet pile out. So it's kind of like scalping it in a way, or like buzz cutting it. And then the piece fits in and is glued in with like epoxy or different glues. I have like 10 glues I use. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and then I wanted to show, so this idea of red plaid, like here's red plaid, and in the drawings, you know, I started showing how the threads could mix and things like that, but then you're able, you know, where red plaid is a organized sort of pattern of, you know, threads, I'm pulling them apart to kind of create something different. As you pull it apart, it makes these sort of fences. So I'm doing this a lot with like this sort of tool, which is like a dental and a ceramic tool, to like literally pull each thread apart and loosen it. And you can see like here's a shape that is, I mean, I just guide this stuff. I don't control it. The thread and the fabric kind of does its own, you could say its own thing. And here's more recent pieces that I'm doing just right now. So this is 1 inch of plaid that I pulled apart, and then it's adhered. It's adhered with like fabric. It's called Paverpol, or like fabric stiffener. It's basically fabric stiffener and a little bit of glue. So as I'm pulling it apart, I'm adding water and this sort of fabric stiffener that, and this is Yupo, which I really like. And as I'm pulling it apart, I'm almost like drawing with this tool or with a brush, but it kind of creates its own sort of release, I call it. It's like a release of plaid, but its own sort of drawing. And you can see like how detailed. So this is a very tightly wound plaid. This is something that's maybe a bit looser, but you could see all the way in the middle. Hope you're not getting dizzy from this camera movement. Oh, that does look cool. So that's like another type of plaid released. And then I'm starting to add like forensic markings. These are measurements. This black and white is a forensic ruler. This is it's like almost like a plastic adhesive thing that traps fingerprints and evidence. And then here's another plaid type, which you can see has a much thicker thread. So it creates a broader stroke, you could say, a broader release. And then, you know, I'm just starting to like take a lot of them. And I don't know, this is early on, but this is all built off released plaid, you could say. Starting to make a composition or a movement. And then I add more structured plaid lines. So some of this is thread, but a lot of it is like that, released plaid. So again, the Venom, this unidentified person wearing red plaid. Well, I'm going to take, red plaid is pretty prevalent in culture. And here's like another piece. I'm just getting bigger and trying to like figure things out. But this centers around a logo, a sports logo that I cut and reorganized. And actually this uses the model of a virus, ironically. The virus entering sort of a cell or the membrane, and then inside it replicates. So this plaid parts up here create all these multiple plaid parts, and they multiply, and then create, and then exit the cell or break through the cell, destroying the cell, and then they enter the body in other ways to go into other cells, which is more plaid, a creation of new plaid. So, you know, through art or this abstraction, and there is this science movement or process that I like to use. And then this one is more of a collage. I started some of these pieces like a year ago, but it's using, you'll recognize that, it's a catalog from the Whitney show, but it's of the crime report, or eyewitness report rather. And then there's not much I have out. I have some hair, which is my hair as evidence, but I'm using a lot of, and fingerprints, I'm using a lot of these forensic rulers, which I got from a forensic kind of supply place. And to create this sort of like, again, this chiasma, this sort of whites and black meeting and trading or cyclical. And then all this is, okay. All this color is not paint. It's again red plaid or red thread and different cut up and chewed up or processed and then kind of painted on. I mean, definitely with a brush. I'm moving and painting it on. And then again, some more evidence like this truck with chrome rims, chrome trim. So using all this into work, this is a character I use a lot. Surveillance, someone under surveillance. Here's another one that's using the DNA. It's an earlier one a few months ago. But this, you could see the plaid very much intact, but a bigger piece pulled apart. I mean, a lot of this is creating patterns or lines that I cannot do. I'm just kind of like with the performance, it's an improvised thing. And then I'll just leave, I'm just gonna show some very early stuff which you can ask about if you want, but I'm taking this, you know, I really don't like restoration hardware or like how they do things, you know. So I'm making these, oh, there's such a lag. Okay, so I'm taking, and sometimes in collage, people combine different sources, but I'm taking different restoration hardware, and they're like really expensive video photo shoots and the lighting, and I'm having them converge on top of each other to like, and these are definitely very new, but I like how, you know, with my background in video and things, the lighting makes everything almost seamless and kind of eerie. Even like, this is like furniture, a stool and parts of a table. And there's all these fire pits they have. So, yeah, you know, why restoration hardware benefits off like this is faux. It just pisses me off. Like, all this is faux to look distressed and all that, and $5,000. You know, it's just like this kind of neoliberal, I don't know, this way of existing of trying to experience this thing, but not really. It's just like made to look like it. I just think it's an aesthetic, and it's just something I really think is not genuine. So I'll take their, you know, I'll take their book and use their high-end photography and kind of subvert it or try to subvert it into something, you know. And here's a collage from the surveillance. This is just something I found on the web, but like this character who's being surveilled, probably I think in London. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but in London, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. But creating that as material, as like, again, I think it references some like video works I've done, but as photography, as collage. But, it, you know, I guess maybe going back to the pattern of carpetry and rug through video. Something else. Okay.
Can I ask you a quick, so do you work on all these things simultaneously when you're in the studio? Do you move back and forth between groups of works, or what's your general way of kind of making?
Yeah.
They all feed off of each other, it seems, right? So.
Yeah, that's a nice question, because just to see like how the room is situated, there's these tables. Yeah, I really bounce from, it seems like it's getting bigger and bigger. Like I'm about to start the carpet piece. There's some larger sculptures I feel like I'm getting close to, but I need like 3 or 4 things going on that one will feed into the next one, you know? So there might be 4 or 5 things going on for months, you know, all at different levels, to feed into each other and inform each other.
Yeah, so that was I mean, it was really great to move from still images, the videos, and then into the studio. And I'm wondering, so is it okay if, I don't know if there's any questions if people have, is it okay to take some questions, or?
Definitely, yeah.
Anyone have anything that you'd like to ask Asif? Probably anything about your work, or what it's like to be an artist, things like that. People are always curious about.
How has this epidemic and this time of complete change and radical upheaval and uncertainty, and day by day everything's so completely different and changing, and everything that's going on, how has that impacted, affected, or changed your work, your methodologies, the things that you consider when making, or anything in relation to that?
That's a really good question. Well, you know, in a concrete way, I was very fortunate. I felt very fortunate that I, you know, right before this, I moved into a new apartment and a new studio. It sounds normal, but that took quite a bit of time to do since January. So I was very fortunate I did that before, because then I could come to the studio and not just be in my apartment or something like that. So and still be careful. But I mean, it kind of messed with me for a while. I mean, just, I did have quite a bit of anxiety, or physical anxiety, different things from the news, from living, you know, I live out on border of Brooklyn and Ridgewood, and you can just feel it through the building and through people. And going through that and just getting kind of a practice, a ritual of coming to the studio at least. And I was doing like 3 days in a row and then 1 day at home. That sort of careful, considerate practice of going to doing something while, yes, a lot's going on, but I feel helpless, you know, in some ways. So that ability, and then also like I was gearing towards this show in the fall at the Queens Museum, but like before that I've been rushing around trying to get things set up. So it was actually good. I realized it took a little bit, but the postponement, taking it slow, going small. I'm not making big work. I'm like working on it. Something about that, working very intimate, very small. Like literally with lines of thread, taking that care, having that intimacy with that material is like maybe a response to everything going on where you can't touch anyone. So having that tactile, you can't touch, you can't do, having that tactile thing, experience, I think is, yeah. And then like, you can't control things. So I'll take this restoration hardware book and I'll control it. I'll take it, I'll take this imagery. Like, I hate, we're all hearing these people who have money, who have, especially in New York, you see the disparity, different people having different economic outcomes of this. So maybe I'm responding to this like book that definitely came out showing furniture, outdoor furniture, at a time when the rich or people who have that can go and buy new furniture for their outside because they're outside more. So maybe that's me responding to that. That's a venom I'm taking to make into anti. So yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely the virus coming up in this thread piece I talked about, which relates to stuff I've been doing in genetics or things I've wrote about before. Kind of was like one way to kind of mess with this virus, maybe. So yeah, it's been a process, but.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else have questions?
Yeah, that was a long.
Oh, it was great. Great.
Okay.
Really great. I love, very thorough. I just like seeing the progression and then actually seeing, well, as close as we can get to the new work, but it's really interesting to see the common sort of themes and material usages through all the work, So
Yeah, thanks. I think I wanted to show that today, especially with having everyone in the studio, the last few years, the progression,
Yeah.
But if there's any like, what tools you use, or can I see that again? Just let me know, can bring the computer around. It's nice. People around. Oh, maybe I'll show, yeah, if anyone has, I'll just show stuff. This is like a little model of like what I would do. The blue is like the, actually the green rug, and the white would be the Afghan rug, but just like a model of how I would cut it up and merge them or collage them, some drawings.
Maybe we could do like we would do at a normal talk. Anyone wants to stick around, for a few minutes, we can just hang out, and then they might have questions a little bit more, and not with the group. Otherwise, maybe some people have to go to class in a little bit, so, or not go to class, well, sort of go to class, I guess. But, just switch to another room for class. But yeah, I just want to say I think it was really fantastic, and thank you so much for doing that. Really, it was like really generous with your time and all the information you gave us. And I know I've always loved your work, but I learned a lot more in the. So I really appreciate the time you gave us. It means a lot to us. So.
No, my pleasure. This was really fun. So.
All right, well, I'll hang out with you a little bit if you want. If not, we'll just wrap it up. But everybody, thanks for coming, and thanks to Asif for everything. And I'm just going to give you a clap for that. So, but it was great. So yeah, stick around. If not, everybody we'll just catch up when we do our meetings online. Otherwise, so. And this may be an awkward moment. So.
I'll just hang. Oh, whatever.
Yeah. So what's your plan? The rest? Are you in the studio working? Do you normally go in for like? Are you still going in regularly now? Or you?
I definitely took some days off after the show was postponed, and then the studio working. Less and less I like to say working. Like it's definitely a mental therapy, like to like just work with material, draw or like move threads, move the aluminum, just like that activity. I think, yeah, I don't know. I just keep maintaining it, and yeah, things are definitely clouded a bit, or like, it's hard. Some people I know aren't working, or they're not, they're not really making work and things. And if some of this turns into work, cool. If not, I'm at least doing the activity, which is just like another way of just thinking,
Yeah.
I enjoy it a lot. So.
So what people are, some of your friends are not making work? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, just people not able to do it now, or
They're
maybe.
not able, or it's in the relative scheme, it's only maybe a couple weeks, a few weeks. So they're not able, or they're not doing it, or they're working at home, which I think is really good. Drawing, or a lot of people drawing, which is good. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't gotten into the whole videos conversing a little bit, which has been fun, but I don't know. I just had this other reaction of just kind of I'm not on Instagram and things. The thing is here. I'm in New York. The thing is here. So I think walking and being outside during the day and engaging with the sun, that's been good. And then actually leaving the studio later, so I don't have to see the stores and all that shut at sundown. I've seen that, the grocery stores, practice to going around, it's there. I guess I had this change where I'm this could be going on for a while, and this just is part of the practice now. It's part of, and there's other ways things will loosen it up, but I think it's going to be going on for a while, and it's just part of how incorporating that into New York right now,
Yeah, I know. Speaking of the show, do you know in the museum the show's going to be? Do you talk about the specifics?
Yeah, we got into talking about right before, that was kind of early on, choosing. There's a gallery, Cindy Shen and me, we're both got this fellowship, which is very great. It's funded and there's help installing. I have the back gallery. When you enter into the Queens Museum, and there's the atrium, the back left, and Sydney's in the front left. So it's a very nice gallery. You know what it's 26 by 40 something feet, and very beautiful. Yeah.
Well, winter will be great. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to shoot a video, some of this performance, putting them together. And I've done, I mentioned a little about this thermal camera work I've been doing. That was at the Shed. And so I want to do a video using this performance and thermal cameras that I'm going to shoot in the middle of the Queens Museum in the atrium.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about the thermal camera and how it's sculptural and visual and many things. It has its own kind of rules, and using that in the Queens Museum. So hopefully, I can shoot that in the fall and transition that over,
Yeah, it sounds so nice to think about it. It'd be great when we can actually go and be in with everyone else. So
yeah, and definitely I don't whoever's left, but coming back next year to maybe talk about that show and specific show. Maybe people can see the show, and then we can talk about it up at Sarah Lawrence.
Oh, that'd be great. I mean, it's depending on how everything works out, it'd be great to take a trip over and see it,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
So I don't know, obviously we have time to arrange it, but that'd be really,
yeah.
We can plan on that. I mean, it'd be really excellent, because a lot of the students that were here were first years, and so they're the ones that really were into your work and wanted you to come. So that would be really exciting for them to see the show.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Really great.
And Sydney's we're both, I guess, going on at the same time. I'm sure she'll have.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Sydney Shen is, so it should be a good, group of shows going on.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you. So there's a few people left. Anybody else? Anything? Julia, are you good? Or are you?
Yeah. If anyone.
Thank you so much. That was so insightful to see how you manipulated different materials for new venues of exploration. Like, I'm still astounded by the thread work and the embedding two different textiles together, and one being a more like industrial material. And I also played 3 sports in high school, and I never really thought about that and how that really shapes a person, and just the agile movement, and even like how you've dismantled sports gear and made new textiles. And I don't know, that brought forth a lot of ideas and a lot of new like venues of just thoughts. And so thank you for your time and giving us a glimpse of your studio and just sharing with us things you've done in the past. I think it was really informative and helpful.
Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah. Great to hear that. Yeah.